This morning, we bring you the story of an amazing awakening. A man was believed to be in a coma for the last 23 years. It turns out he was conscious the whole time and could hear everything, but was unable to say anything. CBS News correspondent Elizabeth Palmer is in London with details. Elizabeth, good morning.
Good morning, Harry. Yes, this is an extraordinary tale of a man in Belgium who came to the attention of researchers at the University of Liège who had been studying patients who were apparently completely unresponsive. For 23 years, doctors believed Rom Hoban was in a vegetative state, barely able to move or think after a car crash. And then a stunning discovery. Dr. Stephen Lawries took another look at Rom's brain using the latest imaging technology.
We put him in the PET scanner and the fMRI, and we saw his brain was functioning normally. So he was not vegetative, definitely not.
For more than 2 decades, Rom had apparently heard and understood everything going on around him. Now the challenge was to let him communicate. A carer was trained to interpret the tiny movements Rom makes at the keyboard to spell out sentences. For Rom, it was a liberation. "I shall never forget the day when they discovered what was really wrong with me," he wrote. "It was my second birth." Rom's mother, Fima, proud to show photos of him before the accident, never stopped believing he was conscious. He couldn't communicate, but I knew, she says, I could tell when he was in a bad mood or when he was in pain. A mother's diagnosis that turned out to be right, and a patient who had to wait more than 20 years for medical science to agree. Now, Rom's case is exceptional, but Dr. Lawries' team found out that 40% of the patients diagnosed as vegetative in his study were, to some extent, misdiagnosed.
Wow,
Harry?
40%. Elizabeth Palmer in London this morning, thank you. So interesting. Joining us now, Dr. Jennifer Ashton. So, someone in a situation like this certainly goes through a battery of tests.
Right.
With the test just, did they read the results wrong, or did they not get what they were really looking for?
Well, no, I don't think they read the results wrong, but as we just heard, about 40% of patients who are diagnosed as being in a persistent vegetative state might be misdiagnosed, and the thinking is there might be 3 reasons. One, the actual testing, as you mentioned, could be flawed, or the interpretation of that testing could be flawed. The other thing is they can start to begin a recovery because, again, this usually follows a traumatic brain injury, and there can be recovery that happens at
over maybe months.
That's right. It can happen immediately. It can happen months or years later. Or they've started to kind of change the definition. Basically, this is very complicated distinction between being awake and being conscious and the activities of the brain, Harry. If you think of it like a train station, there are trains coming in, signals coming in, and signals going out, and it's very complicated.
And certainly you hear about these stories where the relatives or the family members persist and continue to communicate with, and then maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 23 years.
Right, but we also have to be clear, the recovery is usually not 100%.
It's not going to be, he's not going to jump out of bed.
No.
Right, exactly right. Very interesting. Dr. Jennifer Ashton, do appreciate it.